Have you ever really thought about that dollar bill in your wallet? I mean, how does a simple choice you make about your money connect to this giant, complicated global financial system? Well, it turns out it's all linked. So let's dive in and figure out exactly how your wallet fits into the whole shebang.
All right, we're going to kick things off with a personal puzzle. It's a simple little financial choice, but it's one that pretty much everyone faces at some point.
So, what's your gut telling you? Take the $100 now or wait a decade and get double? It seems straightforward, right? But the correct answer is actually way more complex than it looks. And to really figure it out, we need to pull a special tool out of the financial toolbox.
And that tool is called present value. It's basically a time machine for your money. It lets us answer a crucial question. How much would I have to invest right now, today, to end up with that $200 in 10 years? It's the only way we can make a true apples-to-apples comparison between money now and money in the future.
And here's where it gets really interesting. The answer depends entirely on the interest rate you think you can get. Check this out. If you can get a 5% return, that future $200 is actually worth $123 in today's money. So yeah, waiting is a fantastic deal. But if the interest rate is higher, say 8%, that future $200 is only worth $93 today. In that case, you'd be crazy not to take the $100 right now. So the value of future money isn't set in stone. It's always changing.
Okay, so let's flip that idea on its head. Instead of bringing future money back to the present, let's talk about the incredible, almost magical power of growing the money you have right now.
You know it's a big deal when even Albert Einstein is impressed. Compounding is nothing more than your money making babies, and then those babies making their own babies. It's your interest earning its own interest. And over time, wow, it's the engine that can turn tiny acorns into giant oak trees of wealth. And here's a fantastic little mental shortcut to really grasp that power: the rule of 70. If you want to know how long it'll take for your money to double, you just divide the number 70 by the interest rate. So if your investment is growing at 7% a year, it'll double in about 10 years. Pretty cool, right? But if you can get 10%, it doubles in just 7 years. It's such a simple, powerful way to see that growth in action.
Now let's see what this looks like in the real world. Meet Elliot and Darlene. They both start their careers with the exact same salary, but Elliot's income only grows by 1% a year, while Darlene gets a 3% bump. It's just a tiny 2% difference, right? But look what happens. By the time they're ready to retire, Darlene is making more than double what Elliot makes. That, my friends, is the incredible, undeniable magic of compounding.
So we've been talking all about valuing dollars and growing dollars, but it kind of makes you step back and ask a really basic question. What even is a dollar?
No, seriously, think about it for a second. That bill in your wallet? It's just a piece of paper with some fancy ink on it. It's not backed by gold anymore. It has no real intrinsic value. So why on earth does the coffee shop happily trade you a very real, very delicious cup of coffee for it? The answer is kind of weird.
It all boils down to one simple, incredibly powerful word: trust. A dollar has value simply because we all agree it has value. You trust that you can use it to buy things, and the person you're buying from has the exact same trust. Money like this, that's based on faith and a government decree, is called fiat money.
So for something to really work as money, economists say it's got to check 3 boxes. First, it has to be a medium of exchange. You use it to buy stuff. Easy enough. Second, it's a unit of account. It's the yardstick we use to put a price on things. And third, it's got to be a store of value, meaning you can stick it under your mattress today and it'll still be worth something tomorrow.
Okay, so if this whole system runs on trust, that means someone has to be in charge of making sure that trust doesn't just, evaporate. So who's the wizard behind the curtain? Who's controlling the money?
Well, here in the United States, that massive job belongs to the country's central bank, the Federal Reserve. You've probably heard of it. People just call it the Fed.
So what does the Fed actually do? Well, you can think of it as having 2 main gigs. First, it's like the bank for all the other banks, making sure the whole financial system doesn't fall apart. But its biggest, most powerful job is controlling the money supply. Basically, it has its hand on the economy's money faucet.
So how do they turn that faucet on and off? Well, their number one tool isn't a giant printing press. It's something called open market operations. Here's how to think about it. To get more money into the economy, the Fed buys government bonds. This is like a helicopter flying over and dropping fresh cash into the system. And to take money out, they do the opposite. They sell bonds, which acts like a giant vacuum cleaner sucking cash out of the economy.
But, and this is a big but, the Fed is not the only one creating money. Not by a long shot. In fact, your friendly neighborhood bank is creating new money every single day.
And it all happens because of a system called fractional reserve banking. See, when you deposit $100 into your account, the bank doesn't just lock it in a vault. The law requires them to keep a fraction of it, say 10%, as a reserve. But the other $90, they can lend that out.
And this is where the real magic happens. That $90 they loaned out gets spent and then deposited into another bank. That second bank then keeps 10% and loans out the rest. This process repeats over and over again, creating this massive ripple effect. With just a 10% reserve requirement, your original $100 deposit can end up creating up to $1,000 of new money in the economy. That is the money multiplier effect, and it's how commercial banks literally create money out of thin air.
Okay, wow. We have gone all the way from a simple personal choice to how money is actually created. So now let's bring it all back home. Let's connect all these big ideas to your own decisions about what to do with your money.
This little cartoon is actually poking fun at a huge, serious idea in finance called the efficient markets hypothesis. The theory basically says that stock prices already reflect all the known information out there. And if that's true, then trying to beat the market by picking stocks is pretty much a game of pure luck, and a monkey throwing darts at a stock page could do just as well as a Wall Street pro.
So if picking winners is just a crapshoot, what can you actually do? Well, you can manage your risk, and the key, as your grandma probably told you, is diversification. It's the old, don't put all your eggs in one basket idea. You see, you can't get rid of market risk. That's the risk that affects the whole economy, like a recession. But by spreading your money around, you can protect yourself from firm-specific risk, which is just the risk that one company you invested in goes belly up.
And this all leads us to the single most fundamental rule of investing, the risk-return trade-off. It's really simple. Historically, safer things like government bonds have given you lower returns. If you want a shot at those higher returns you can get from stocks, you absolutely have to accept more risk. There is no such thing as a free lunch.
So there you have it. We've gone from a simple choice about $100 all the way to the Fed, the creation of money, and the core principles of risk and return. You now have the map, you know the players, and you know the rules of the game. So the only real question left is, how are you going to play?